If I can ask you to take your seats, please. Good evening to you all. Welcome members, welcome officers and those that may be joining us via the webcast this evening to this afternoon's meeting of the Maidstone Joint Transportation Board being held today, Wednesday the 16th of October 2019 in the Town Hall. Very quickly, the usual bits of housekeeping. I can assure you there are no planned fire drills, so if we hear such a noise, please follow the instructions of Mr. Nash, who is seated to my right. He will make us safely evacuate the building. I'd like to remind you all that the meeting is webcast, live and recorded for playback, but I'd also inquire of you if anybody else intends to record or film. And I'm asking that not to prevent you, but merely so that others would be aware that that is the case. Not seeing any indications. And usual courtesies, please, with mobile ringing devices that might go beep at the wrong moment. So let's go straight to business. Apologies for absence. I have been advised that Councillor Kimments may be running... look, he arrives on the bell. Yeah. And similarly, Councillor Mrs. Prendergast may also be running a little late. Councillor Hodson.
Stockwell and Carter.
Apologies duly noted. Are there any substitute members that I need to take account of? Councillor Cox.
Councillor Cox for Councillor Wilby.
Item 3, urgent items. There's no last-minute papers, no last-minute items. Item 4, notification of visiting members. If you are a visiting member, can I trouble you just to come to the microphone and just record your name and if there's any item that you wish to speak to?
Councillor Perry, just here to observe. Thank you.
Thank you, that's noted.
Councillor Spooner, just general interest. Thank you.
Again, thank you, that's noted. No others? Oh, sorry. Didn't see you there.
Councillor Vizard, academic interest, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. To item 5, disclosures by members and officers. Are there any disclosures, please? No indications, therefore none noted. Disclosures of lobbying at item 6. Any lobbying? Not seeing any, none noted. Item 7, there are no exempt items, no yellow pages before us this evening, so I move that everything will be taken in public. Is that agreed? Thank you. And next to the minutes of our last meeting that was held on the 10th of July 2019, they were circulated with the agendas. I trust you've all had time to look across them. Are there any amendments necessary? Councillor Cumming.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. On page 4 at the top, it refers to email addresses being circulated to all members of this board outside of the meeting. I don't appear to have received this at this time.
Okay, we'll take that on board, but not an amendment as such, just a follow-up action. If there's nothing else, I shall sign those as a true copy. Is that agreed? Thank you. Item 9 is presentation of petitions, and there are no petitions this evening. And item 10 is questions from members of the public. I've been advised of one question from Mr. Willis. If you would like to come to the speaker's table, the floor is yours.
Hello, councillors and officers. Thank you for taking the question. A statement was made to the Joint Transport Board by Kent Highways some 3 years ago, agreeing to enable funding for a pedestrian crossing at Hermitage Lane, Fountain Lane intersection, which was backed by local residents. Some 3 years ago, also, Miss Lizzie Hare submitted a petition, stroke presentation, and despite much hard work, nothing appears to have happened to make this a reality. As is an extremely acute safety issue, please could you advise on the progress, advise me on the progress of this matter?
Thank you, Mr. Willis. Thanks for reminding of this, and I have a good news answer for you. I'm led to believe that there has been a meeting with county and borough members local to the work that you're talking about, and it has been agreed that the major capital programme team lead on the delivery of this improvement utilising Section 106 funding that has been made available, and will seek to deliver this project early in 2020. Further updates to the local members will be given, providing confidence that this is actually going ahead. If you have a supplementary question, you're very welcome to ask.
Thank you for the answer. Could I just point out that this is I was previously a councillor for this area, and this is an extremely sensitive issue. I think a lot of in this room would feel very guilty if a child was injured in that area, because we've all tried to work hard to push this forward. Is there any more times, could we ask, and you may not get an instant answer, for any more closer detail about timescales? You mentioned 2020. In 2016, we were told 2018, I believe. Can we try and push for a bit more of for safety reasons?
At the briefing session for this meeting, the officers were very positive and very definite that they'd be cracking on with this post haste. Early 2020, I think, is great, and I'm sure it's supported by all members here. And as I said, further updates will be given to the local members, so they'll have a watching brief and will be kept fully appraised. If there are any further delays, then I suggest it be brought back as an item, but I think we can be confident that everybody's lined up to crack on as quickly as possible. Agenda item 11, if we just quickly review the work programme. There's actually only one item on there, and I've been speaking with Councillor Bird, who's raised this, and rather than leave it on the programme with no certainty at the moment, we're going to remove it, I believe, with your agreement. There's going to be some research about possibilities and options, and then we can come back when there are actually some firm, fresh proposals of how that may or may not proceed. I trust you're happy with that, Councillor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Burton.
Thank you. So, unless anybody has anything else to add, Councillor Clark?
Yes, Chairman. I think last time we had a number of items and we were looking for specific dates. We seem to have lost all of our work programme now that we're taking this item off.
Just double checking for my own sanity.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
I think there are some updates that are owed, and we'll make sure that's circulated. We can move on now, please, to agenda item 12. We have two gentlemen with us this evening from Highways England. There are two items that you're going to help us with. We're going to start with an update on the M2 Junction 5 A249 works, 246 works. And if you'd be kind enough perhaps to just introduce yourselves to the board, what your roles are, and help us with the item, please.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councillors and officers. My name is Andy Salmon from Highways England. I'm programme leader for 6 schemes in the south east, M2 Junction 5 A249 being one of them. My colleague Harshal Chalaki is project manager for our designer. And we're here this evening just to give you an update on progress on the scheme. Just to remind you that the M2 Junction 5 A249 scheme is to provide additional capacity for the junction through improvements to the slip roads and enhance approaches. Bit of history, we went to statutory public consultation in September 2017. We went to our preferred route announcement on option 4H, May 2018, and we're following the Highways Act statutory process to get permission to proceed. Highways Act orders were published in June 2019 this year, and the objection period ended in July of this year. And in that we received 8 statutory objections, 7 non-statutory objections, including a collection from Stockby Parish residents, and 3 further representations and 11 letters of support. As a result of that, the DFT confirmed at the end of August that to us that unless all the statutory objections are withdrawn, the scheme will have to proceed to a public inquiry. And we have now received a date, should it go to public inquiry, of the 11th of February 2020 from the planning inspector. But in the meantime, the project team are working with the objectors to address their concerns with the aim of trying to remove their objections and therefore not go to a public inquiry. On site, we have been carrying out some work, primarily surveys, and we are done surveys to look for bats, dormice, orchids and badgers. We're doing quite a lot of extensive ground investigation work to help with the detailed design, and we've been doing pavement surveys to establish existing construction of the carriageway. And coming up before Christmas, we'll be statutory undertakers will be doing trial holes to establish depths primarily of a water main. We're progressing with negotiations with our potential contractor. The way we're procuring this and other schemes through our new regional delivery partnership. So our contractors have already signed a package framework agreement with us, and the contractor in line to take on this scheme is John Graham Construction Limited, who are based in Ireland but have had extensive experience with Highways England in the past, but probably slightly a new name to the southeast of England, and we're hoping to get into scheme contract with them in the very, very near future. That's the summary of M2 Junction 5.
Thank you very much. You're happy to take questions?
Yes, certainly. Yes.
Questions. Before we do that, though, welcome to Councillor Mrs. Prendergast to the meeting. Can I just check with you any disclosures of lobbying? None noted. Thank you very much for the record. Members, any questions relating to this scheme?
Okay, good.
You're getting off very lightly this evening, but it sounds like there's progress, and
No, we are
we look
full
forward
steam ahead with
to further updates.
Yeah, absolutely.
Members, we're just asked to note that report. Is that noted? Similar exercise at agenda item 13, an update on M20 safety issues.
Okay. Operation Brox doesn't fall under my responsibility, and apologies that my colleagues couldn't be here this evening to give you a direct update. I have got something I can just read through, and then I can take any questions and feedback to the team if I can't answer them.
That would be excellent. Thank you.
Again, the reasons why the Brock barrier is in place, it gives the people of Kent a scalable set of measures that helps them to live, work and travel around the county when there's disruption to services across the English Channel, as well as the M20 contraflow. It also includes Maidstone Airfield and the M26. Highways England has worked in close partnership with Kent Police, Kent County Council and the Department for Transport to ensure that each phase of Operation Brock could be deployed sequentially and scaled up or down to meet demand. The deployment of the contraflow on the M20 in March and April 2019 was a prudent measure reflecting the threat of potential disruption. And as a result of the reduction in potential disruption to cross-channel travel, Operation Bok moved to its current inactive state on Monday the 15th of April. This means the coastbound carriageway between junctions 8 and 9 of the M20 returned to a 3-lane motorway. 2 running lanes are opened on the London-bound carriageway with a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. And the speed restriction is in place for safety of all drivers. The reason it needs to remain, following discussions with our partners in the Kent Resilience Forum, the steel barrier on the London-bound carriageway will remain in place until further notice. This will enable the deployment of the contraflow at short notice should there be any cross-channel disruption in the coming months. These arrangements will remain under regular review, but the barrier is unlikely to be removed before the end of October 2019. I'm happy to take any questions. Apologies if I can't answer them directly, but I will pass them back to the team and who will hopefully contact you directly.
Thank you for what you've shared with us. Councillor Bird.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. Well, the agenda item was M20 safety. And with respect, I don't think the word safety was addressed once in the report that we've just had. My concern relates to the fact that we have 13.5 miles from junction 9 to junction 8. We have no hard shoulder, no refuges, and as far as I can see, last time I drove there about 3 weeks ago, no overhead gantries. So if anybody breaks down or has any form of problem, they're going to be stuck in the carriageway, and there's no way of warning oncoming traffic that there's an obstruction. And that oncoming traffic could involve foreign registered HGVs who regularly flout the speed limit and never get prosecuted. It is not safe. Everybody knows it's not safe, and the Highways England are doing nothing about it. I'm sorry, I'm not satisfied.
Appreciate that it's not your specialist subject, but I don't know if you have any response.
Well, yes, I've certainly mentioned safety in the response, but I will feed that back. It's not under my responsibility, but I will, as Councillor Bird, I will get someone from the team to address that specifically and try and address the concerns raised.
I think it's a very valid point that's been raised, and either perhaps a written response or a return visit by the appropriate person. Perhaps we could consider that. Now I've got Councillor Daly, and then I think I've got Councillor Cook.
Well, thank you, Chairman. This question of safety on motorways is one that's with us all the time, but this 8 to 9 on the M20 is particularly difficult. Basically, as Mr. Bird has pointed out, there are lacking certain features which we would normally have expected on motorways. The hard shoulder, for example, being eliminated is extremely difficult. Now, so far as I'm aware, there is no indication when you enter this section from Ashford coming towards Maidstone that cars should be on the near side lane and lorries on the offside lane. I don't think there is any indication of that. Therefore, you will get a mix. And it has been noted, and I've had 1 or 2 people coming to me to say that the Brock barrier, being the colour it is, and particularly in twilight hours, is exceptionally difficult to see where it finishes and where the roadway is, and people have noted this as being a difficulty. Now, we can make all sorts of excuses. People that should be only doing 50 miles an hour, they should only be doing this or that or the other thing. But lorries particularly are often doing more than 50 miles an hour. There is no space, lateral space. The carriageways now are so narrow that just one small blip in your driving and you are in connection possibly with a vehicle, another vehicle, And if you actually hit the Brock barrier in the middle of the road there, you will possibly be flipped and possibly swung sideways, and that will cause a great fall. Now, we do know that the M20 has suffered a lot more accidents and multiple vehicle accidents of late days, only 2 or 3 this last week, ending up with the motorway being blocked and therefore people all coming on the A20, and that ends up in Maidstone with particularly from junction 8 coming into the town with a gridlock. It just happens. You can't stop people driving, making them drive better than they already do, but that particular stretch of motorway now is, I believe, to be very, very dangerous. It's even worse perhaps a little further up, if you get that far up to junction 3 to 2, where there's the crossover onto the M26 and people get completely diverted in the way in which they can access that, and there are more accidents there now. The statistics actually do show that there have been more incidents on that motorway than ever before. So I hear what the gentleman says. He's from Highways England, therefore he's the man in the frame today. It may not be his department, but I do ask, please, that somebody can have a look at the Brock barrier. I know that there will be various ideas. If it had some white dots on it, perhaps it might be more visible. But I leave it to other people to make that decision. A safety audit might be useful, but the figures do speak for themselves. There are too many accidents on that motorway now, which never actually were occurring before Brock was put into operation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Some very practical observations, which I think are meant in a very constructive
Thank you very much
manner.
for that. I've noted everything down, Councillor Davey, and I'll get that addressed by my colleagues.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I fully support what Councillor Bird and Councillor Mr Daly have been saying. I just wanted to add a few words about what I think is a counterintuitive situation. We actually start to call these things smart motorways these days. And frankly, I think they are anything but smart. We've got a situation where coroners are now referring to smart motorways as being unsafe. And we are, as you drive down the M20 and see the work that's going on, pouring money into turning something that was hitherto more safe than it currently is into something that I believe is inherently unsafe, and that's supported by what Councillor Bird and Councillor Daly have said. I can see a situation where through pressure from coroners and other people, the money that's been spent creating this smart motorway is going to be used very smartly to undo the work and return it to what it was before. And that's a shame, because it could be the money could be used better elsewhere. Could I ask, Chairman, through you, please, that given the nature of that what we've been talking about in terms of the safety issues on the M20, that we request a written paper from Highways England, please. I very much appreciate verbal updates, which are a little bit soundbitey. I think that we're entitled to, I think most members would want to get into a little bit more detail. So if we could have a written paper about what we've been raising today. And frankly, Chairman, I think that would have been a good idea to do, to come back on item 12 with something similar to that as well. I know my colleague would have been grateful if that could have been raised at the time, but we missed the point then. If I could leave that with you, sir.
Thank you for that. Can I just clarify, with the points you're making regarding the smart motorway that's being constructed between junctions 3 and 5, or were you referring to Operation Brock?
I'm referring to smart motorways in general. I don't believe that they are safe. And I think that we've had deaths on the M1 near Sheffield. We've had deaths on the M6. And only in the last few days, coroners who have been looking at some of these, the accidents that have been occurring on smart motorways because there wasn't a safe place to pull over in terms of the refuges that we were talking about. They're not safe.
Okay, I would say smart motorways is not my area of responsibility. It's a different topic to Operation Brock, but again, I will kind of give you some a response regarding smart motorways in general.
Thank you. Sorry, do you want to just repeat that on the microphone, just so it's recorded?
Sorry, I think it's important that we get a written paper on this covering all of the issues that we've raised this evening, please. If through you.
Okay, we'll wrap that up at the end as an action point. Councillor Kimmons, then Councillor Sams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, I wanted to concrete what Mr. Cook said, because obviously, being a professional driver, smart motorways are not very smart. They moved the banks back, they removed the arm code barriers, and if you go along where they're actually doing the work, because the work's like nearly completed, it's on the final stage, you'll see that there's lampposts and there's no arm code barrier protecting those lampposts. Anyway, that's just to concrete what you're saying. I don't agree with smart motorways. Also, about Operation Borough, the speed limit that's in force, is it monitored, and are there tickets issued? Because obviously it's a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit, so I want to know, is that being enforced at all?
Is that something you can answer?
I've noted the question, and I'll get a response back to you,
Okay.
Councillor.
Not able to get a specific answer now, but we'll get a response on that. Councillor Sams?
I feel it's quite unusual tonight because I don't often agree with Councillor Cook, but you're spot on, you really are. And I've got to be honest with you, I quite like badgers, so Brock's a sad name, but I do feel that a little bit cheated and a bit disappointed because, to be honest with you, because it's so serious and everyone is saying how serious the situation is, we really should have had a written report. And that should have included statistics with that report as well. And it should have, we're going to talk a bit later about what's happening in Harwich, about there's been a safety audit because there's been accidents and things have been changed, quite correctly so. But there's nothing really that we know of has actually changed. I just think that, the community deserves to have a better report, no disrespect, sir, but than this. And I think that we can't really make a judgment on anything because we really don't know because there's nothing to look at. And just, I suppose, finally, I know that Councillor Daly said about the visual thing, and I think, again, you're absolutely right. When you drive down that road, down the motorway, visually, it's really, really quite difficult. And I don't think that Highways England and the safety audit has been actually carried out properly. And it'll be interesting to know what the accident statistics are, because quite honestly, I don't know. I don't think anyone around this room knows. So a little bit disappointed because I think we should have had better facts than that. And no disrespect to the person giving that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Cooper, then Chittenden.
Thank you very much. I just have a question actually surrounding the barrier between junction 9 and 8. Now I remember before it was put up being informed that it was a temporary solution and it was fairly easy to deploy. You're now saying the contrary to that it is going to remain in situ for the time being because it isn't particularly easy to deploy. I'd quite like to know which way round it is and how long you envisage this to remain in place. Now, I appreciate that, it depends on what happens on October 31st, but there are likely to be changes in the future as well. Is it going to be there for another year, another 18 months until we end our transition period of the European Union? It would be quite nice to have a little bit more certainty around that if you can.
Okay, I've again noted the question. Might be able to add a little bit more about why it takes so long to put in and out again. The barrier takes about 4 weeks to put out and about 4 weeks to take in again and has significant time and expense and roadworks implications. The London-bound M20 would need to be closed overnight each night during that operation, and a total of around 22 kilometres of barrier would need to be removed. Barriers fixed to the road surface, road markings would need to be repainted. So it's quite an exercise to take it in and take it out. So at the moment, in conjunction with the Kent Resilience Forum, we've got a strategy that we're deploying.
Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. Just one more quick bit about junction 8 to 9. I can remember it was somewhere between a year and 18 months ago when everybody was raising concerns about the narrowness of the lanes, about the risk, about the speed, and the concern of the increase in accidents, that there was a promise or a statement made by Highways England that to deal with that, they would be bringing the mobile cameras down from outside the area, and they would be down in force, and that would be checking the speeds. Now, as far as I know, none of this has happened. Now, what the question I'd like, and perhaps this can be part of the report that comes back to us, has there been any checking, formal checking? Because as far as I can see, there hasn't, either by the police or mobile cameras. And if not, now that it's being opened officially, if you like, is there going to be the checking that was outlined to us probably a year, 18 months ago? Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I've noted the question. Thank you very much for that.
Incidentally, the reason I do make a point of using the councillor title is it makes it very transparently clear for members of the public present or watching by webcast which of us are their elected members and which of us may be officers or experts. But I do it for reasons of transparency and very deliberately so. But yeah,
It doesn't worry me, Chairman.
Yeah. Okay, so that, Councillor Mrs Prendergast, I think you were next.
Thank you, Chairman. I just really want to support this call for a written report on both items. As you know, I had specifically asked for the first report. I'm sorry I wasn't here for it, and I know we can't go back on it, but I was concerned about the impacts that it was having on my community in Stockbury, both socially and economically, and obviously the M20 safety implications, again, impact on Hollingbourne, Harwich, surrounding villages. And you know, it would have been really great. We were hoping for Highways England to be here at the last meeting and even perhaps the meeting before, but things have happened and here we are. But from what I'm hearing, we're not getting the information that we need. So I think written reports are absolutely essential in both cases in this instance. And then at least we've got something in writing that we can go directly back to Highways England and follow up on if we wish to. But this hasn't been quite enough, or it's not what I was expecting it to be. I'll leave it there.
So by way of sort of summing up, I think it's good to observe that we're grateful that Highways England are actually attending our meetings at all. That's not always been the case. I think you've all expressed the desire to actually have some more concrete contributions and feedback. I think you've clearly got the message of how big an issue the M20, you know, we're blessed, some would say cursed, by 3 junctions entering our borough. It is a very big issue to us. And perhaps directly with the clerk we can work out whether it's going to be a single written response or perhaps a written report and a further attendance. But if we can liaise with you beyond the meeting and to keep this dialogue going, and we do appreciate that actually we've got real people from Highways England here that we can converse with and convey this to.
Yeah, I fully understand the point you made. Apologies, I came more prepared for M2 Junction 5, but I've obviously heard all the concerns around Operation Brock. I'll feed that back, and we also will liaise with yourselves regarding...
And smart motorways.
And smart motorways.
Yeah.
And we'll liaise with yourselves how best to inform this board
communicate
in the
those
future.
responses and further involvement in the future. Thank you both very much indeed. Appreciate that. For the record, members, we're just asked to note what's been said this evening, and of course I will continue with the Vice Chair and myself to liaise for further updates in the most appropriate manner that we can. Is that noted, members? We can move to agenda item 14. Now, this is just a written report for information. We don't actually have an officer from KCC presenting this evening, but if there are any specific matters that you want to raise having read it, I am told that officers that are present can take that back for further information for us. Is there anything? Councillor Hinder.
Thank you, Chair. I note the report concerns the predicted traffic increases from the proposed Lower Thames crossing. I would like, on behalf of, especially for Waterside, for this report to also include predicted increases in level of development in the north of the borough, Walderslade, Lordswood, and what's been predicted on the borders with Medway.
Okay, I think KCC officers have got the understanding of that, and that will be fed back, but we won't have an answer this evening, obviously. Councillor Chittenden.
Thank you, Chairman. This one is a great pity to me, what's happened here, because well, I can remember the first meeting I went to when it was brief, and also I think there was a radio show where they were giving the variance items, and everybody was looking at what they were offered. And one of the offering then was variance C, and it seemed so common sense that if you're going to divert through a tunnel, as has now been agreed, with the Lower Thames crossing, then it was obvious where the rest of the traffic was going to go. And it was going to go down the M2 for a bit, then it's going to find its way down to the M20, along two roads, both of which have actually got a horrific accident rate, and continue to do so, especially Bluebell Hill. And while we find they're looking at it, they're talking now about 2005 scheme, at least 2025 scheme, before anything major happens. We know there is already major danger there. There are accidents virtually every week. In the winter, it's even worse. Now, what worries me about this is that 2025 maybe, but I'm just wondering whether it means more like 2030, which is more near the date that we're expecting the tunnel to open, which is a long way away before we actually get an improvement, because all the time the traffic's going to increase. I don't know the answer, but I'm hoping that what happens is that they can bring this forward as far as possible, Chairman, because it's needed now, not in 10 years' time. But irrespective, I think it was a disgrace when it was taken out from the original scheme and left to be considered separately. So I don't know if it would do any good, our complaining about it, but I still think it's something, we know it's a major problem as a county council, and I'm hoping that somewhere along the line the message gets back that Bluebell Hill at least needs major work on it, and as soon as possible, because meantime the accidents are increasing, the injuries are increasing. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I'll go to Councillor Mrs Prendergast next.
Thank you again. Chairman, I wonder, with your permission, if there is scope and if members agree to bring this item back when we have officers here to answer questions, because I personally have a lot of detailed questions I want to ask on the A249. I've made reference to Stockbury already, and I feel that these can't be this needs to come back. Please.
Just looking for a quick support for that to re-include it in the work programme. Yes? Yeah. Okay, we'll take that forward at agenda setting. Looking for indications. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I wondered, given point 3.13, there's mention, I'm thinking about how we plan for the various options, and it mentions that large local major schemes will require a 15% local contribution. This is the developer contribution for housing. Given that we're in a cycle of reviewing the local plan, is that something we can bring up at agenda setting for the SPI committee at Maidstone. So I'm just mentioning the fact that on point 3.13, it mentions that for large local major schemes, a 15% local contribution will be required. Given how early we are in our local plan review, that's something that we'll need to start thinking about, officers at MBC now, if we're going to move forward. Can we put that on the agenda for SPI?
Well, I think at the next meeting, we're actually reviewing the spending record from... I'm going to pass across to Mrs. Arnold because she'll get the right words, but there is an opportunity coming up where we could start to bring it into the work programme.
Thank you, Chairman. So there are a couple of options. Obviously, as you point out, we're undertaking a local plan review. As part of that, we will be producing a new infrastructure delivery plan, which will be through liaison with infrastructure providers and will highlight who and the funding mechanisms available for those kinds of things. So I think that should naturally come out as part of that anyway. Also, as the Chairman pointed out, we do have a report coming in November, which is an update to the funding that has been received for the financial year from October the 1st, 2018 to April to 31st of March 2019. It also will provide a brief update on what's coming in the last 2 quarters. But again, that's be an opportunity perhaps for SPI members to indicate an interest in strategic spend moving forward, as well as an update on our current infrastructure delivery plan.
Well done. That's exactly what I was going to say. Thank you. Does that satisfy for now? It's on the radar. Councillor Chittenden? No. Councillor Sams? No. Sorry, Councillor Mrs. Brindle.
I note at 3.5, bullet point 1, or the first bullet point, there is a comment made that M2 Junction 3, which we already acknowledge as being beyond capacity. Can we just be certain that KCC are continuing to support the case for this to be included in that project?
Okay, Mr. Ball. Okay, so we don't have an answer this evening, but that question is specifically noted to take back. So tonight's meeting, if it does have a theme, is when these reports come, it's absolutely imperative that we do have the appropriate officers with us and that we have the written word to be able to get some substance in advance. So I'm sure you'll all support me in making that very loud and clear that we appreciate sometimes there are reduced resources, but tonight is way too thin. So that one will come back. So we'll not note it on this occasion. We'll actually adjourn it to a future meeting. This is going to run again on agenda item 15. There is a report giving us an update on the Thameslink route. There's no presenting officer. Would anybody like to raise any matters? I think there might be an indication. Councillor Bird.
Well, Chairman, it won't come as any surprise to say how disappointed we are with the lack of progress on this. We are trying to get to the bottom of the problem, and if anybody has a spare hour or so, I would suggest they watch the webcast of the Rail Summit in County Hall yesterday, where the Strategic Planning Director for Southeastern Routes of Network Rail acknowledged that they have serious problems with getting the junctions in the southern part of London to provide sufficient capacity for any additional trains, which is a rather depressing prospect for any growth of rail traffic from Kent into central London. We work on. We have been promised a meeting with the rail minister and the rail chiefs, but I think we've been led down a garden path here, because I think the Network Rail, and I'm sure the DFT themselves, would have known that they had serious constraints. And although we've been pushing for Thameslink for many years, they've probably known for some time that they were going to struggle to deliver it.
I think we're all deeply, deeply disappointed and let down by the way this one has gone. And I think, you know, irrespective of what side we might sit on, we're actually united on this, and we've actually petitioned previously by letter, supported across the board. Speaking to a colleague earlier, there was a suggestion that maybe there could be some merit in a piece of work being undertaken to attempt to assess the detrimental economic impact to us here. You know, there is a opportunity loss, there is a travel time cost, there is a business cost, an economic cost that has got to be huge and significant, and I wonder whether this would be a forum where we could make that request. Councillor Cox.
I did ask our Economic Development Department to look at this, but the comment I got back quite quickly was it would be somewhere in excess of £15,000 to possibly do that piece of work, because you would have to go very wide to talk to businesses, infrastructure, everything. And I don't know whether it would be a cost that might be worth sharing, obviously to share the information that we get from it. It would also take considerable time to do that work with any merit to it, because we have got to go, as I say, into quite some depth. Anybody could just say X millions is going to be lost, X thousand jobs will not be created, but I think in the past we didn't see that we had the time before we were told it was going to actually appear. So each time we have been fobbed off. I would have thought anybody looking at their train set would see that if we've only got 3 rails coming through a certain gap, it was never going to happen, but we weren't told that information. So we didn't proceed with this amount of information. If it's something this committee really thinks would benefit, I can look again and we will come back to this committee and say how long it would take to do, and what it would actually cost. I agree it would be a good piece of work, but will it change the fact that we're trying to put a pint through a half-pint pot? I don't know.
It feels like we'd be accepting defeat if we don't keep pushing. And pushing with evidence is going to be far more powerful than no evidence. And I think your point is really valid. You know, next December, well, clearly it wasn't necessary, but we're into a new stage with this. And I don't know whether this should be a collaborative piece of work, Maidstone and County, or whether it actually sits more within the county expertise with a higher arching, higher level responsibility for transport. But one way or another, I'm saying I think it needs doing. Shall we revisit it? Supported in principle or felt to be unnecessary? I'm just trying to get a sounding. Councillor Hodson.
There's sympathy all round with your thoughts, Chairman, but having had a briefing on the meeting yesterday, it's depressing news. And I think it's 5 years away, minimum. And if it's 5 years away minimum, time we get our figures out, we'll need more figures and more figures. I just think lobbying, everybody's lobbied, MPs have lobbied, political parties have lobbied. There is, I mean, Rob was actually there, but there are physical, practical, technical problems. And you're right, Leader, to the extent that we've been given promises, and given promises, and given promises. But those promises have been political promises. They've not been technical promises. And that's where the failure's been. I just think we not bide our time for 5 years. I'm sure there will be many associations, businesses, MPs, councils, lobbying, following last night's meeting, which is very disappointing.
Councillor Cox.
Sorry.
You say that we haven't had any technical promises. I was at a Kent leaders group in July 18, I think, where we were all briefed. And I believe 2 gentlemen from Network Rail actually said, I asked the question directly, is this feasible? Is there the capacity within the junction that you are bringing forward? Boundaries of safety, we believe it is. Now, if someone's moved the boundary of safety and said we can accept X amount of trains in with a 2-minute gap or whatever, the fact, will it gather good weight with our argument? And I think we should consider it again. We could possibly talk about it again on the 25th of October.
That seems like a sensible way forward. Let's scale the cost, and then if there's any merits, we could come back with a proposal and see whether this board supports it or otherwise. I think I've got Councillor Daly.
Yeah, Chairman, it's just the fact that my memory's not gone yet completely, so I can suggest that we've been fobbed off and fobbed off and fobbed off with technical details over the years, because in 1998, 99, 20 years ago, I went to a big conference in Blackfriars concerning the situation concerning Thames Link, particularly relative to the southeast. And we were given all sorts of details at that time of what would need to be done before Thames Link could be extended, particularly to places like Maidstone. One of them was the Blackfriars had to be reconfigured. That has been done. The other one was London Bridge would need to be completely refigured, and that's been done for the last 2 years and is now finished and is done. Cannon Street Junction was also going to be reconfigured, and that has also been done. And then a little further out, the Shortlands Junction, which was always a problem with the Catford Loop and all the other things that went with it, and the suburban railway, has been overcome because they dug a tunnel under it so that they could do that junction as well. So all this work which was supposed to be done to take the technical problems away so that Maidstone at last would get a Thameslink service has all been accomplished and finished. So I don't know what more they can physically do on that. It's a question of how you can get the trains up and down. Forget the underground system works, we know, with about an interval between trains of about 1.7 minutes or something like that. You know, don't worry about that. This particular thing here is going on, and in our papers here, we've got 4 different dates where we've been fobbed off in the last 2 or 3 years. And Mr. Grayling not replying to letters and Mr. Shapps not replying to letters is not making our temper any less severe. So I just don't know where we're going to go with this. But, you know, they've actually got to the point now where they're going to actually spend some money on the station here in Maidstone, at last, specifically to deal with the Thameslink terminus. So, you know, are they spending money unwisely, or what are they doing? But to keep fobbing us off like this, and now we have no date at all in prospect, is just unforgivable. But we've been waiting 20 years for this, and it just can't go on like this. We've noted, haven't we, that companies have actually come into Maidstone and based themselves here on the promise, as it were, of better links to the London terminus. And it's not happening. So I don't know how you can actually put a gun to anybody's head on this. But I really feel that it's time, I'm going to talk about revolution, but it's about time that the natives down here got a bit more restive, I think, with government, because we are just being fobbed off. And it could be another 20 years. I mean, you know, what's to stop it? So I'm just saying, all the things we were told in 1998 had to happen before anything further could go on, have all been accomplished, every one of them. So whether or not there's massive trains coming from Sevenoaks or anywhere else, I just don't know. But this line, this Mid-Kent line, has always been the Cinderella, since 1884. And it's time now for it to stop. And I don't know how we're going to do it, but somebody has really got to put their foot down and go for somebody in Parliament to do something. They can spend billions of pounds on HS2 that probably nobody wants to go 20 minutes quicker to Birmingham, but they can't find a few £1,000s to sort us out.
Thank you. Councillor Chittenden. Councillor Bird.
Chairman, just to be brief, a matter of clarification. The gentleman from Network Rail yesterday referred to capacity constraints on a number of junctions south of where Councillor Daly was referring to, in places like Chislehurst and Grove Green. It wasn't a safety issue, it was capacity. And their concern was, and really they should have known this a long time ago, their concern was that if you are operating a junction at full capacity, then you only need one train to be 30 seconds late, and the knock-on implications for the whole network are catastrophic. They should have known that for ages. If their junctions are at full capacity, they could have predicted this 5, if not 10 years ago. And I think we should be rightly very, very angry with Network Rail and the Department for Transport for not getting to grips with this a lot earlier. Thank you.
That's an interesting point you make, because if they got those calculations wrong before, we've got no confidence that they've got them correct now. And that's wherein lies the need to actually investigate and expose this. Don't know how we take that forwards, but interesting point you make. The matter was for noting this evening. I think there's a lot of work going on with both authorities to drive this forwards as hard as it can be. I'm sure it'll be a topic that returns to us. For now, members, is the report noted? Reluctantly and regrettably noted. Agenda item 16, A20 Harwich Highways improvements. Mr. Watson, can you help us with this?
Thank you, Chairman. This report informs the Board on progress to date on the A20 Harwich highway improvements funded by Section 106 developer contributions. The scheme was split into two phases, with the first phase substantially complete, just leaving snagging items and the issues highlighted in 4.3, which County Member Shalina Prendergast has requested. To answer those bullet points, the temporary 30-mile-per-hour signs will be erected shortly. Post-scheme speed surveys are to be undertaken in November. The build-outs to the 30-mile-per-hour gateways have been removed and replaced with temporary wide white lining. The alteration to some of the white lining is still to be actioned, along with the additional topsoiling on some of the verges. In order to progress phase 2, further Section 106 funds needed to be secured, which they have now been. Phase 2 will now have to be broken down into a further phase, as the street lighting will be the first element completed, followed most likely in spring 2020 by the microsurfacing, which needs to be done after the Southern Gas Network installation of their service, and following the embargo of works on the A20 for before Brexit. And this report is for noting, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mrs Prendergast.
Thank you. I must apologise for the declaration I made at the beginning of the meeting. I've clearly been lobbied extensively on this item, so if that could be noted, please. I asked for this to come back, as you know, because I had significant concerns about the financial shortfall. So I'm grateful to Mr Watson, A, for being here and for the clarity of his report, because I think those issues have now been dealt with. There are a couple of outstanding things that I've asked for as a temporary measure, but I know that they're works in progress or just waiting dates to come forward, so that they've either been done. So on my part, and I'm sure Harwich members will have something to add here, I'm quite content with this on the proviso that Mr Watson continues to keep Harwich Parish Council, obviously the ward members and myself, informed. I don't think there's any... I'm happy with what I've seen here, and I think this is the end of the matter for this group. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sams.
Well, I suppose that what I'd like to do is actually thank Councillor Prendergast for assistance on this scheme, because I don't know how many times we've all walked up and down it. It's been a lot of times we've walked up and down it, but you know, I think we've been persistent and consistent with working with officers to try and rectify the difficulties that we've had, and in particular the build-outs that have been removed. You know, we did say from the very first, you know, and I know that you said this as well, Shalina, that you know we had problems with these build-outs from the beginning, and unsurprisingly they've been taken away because of the accident, which is really good. But what I'd like to say is, you know, this has been a really difficult scheme for the residents of Harwich to put up with, and generally speaking, they put up with it pretty well. And we've got I suppose I just wanted to tell a 10-second story about a resident in a wheelchair who can actually now travel along the A20 and go to the shop for the first time ever. And he feels confident and happy to do so. And I think that's the measure of what we've actually achieved here. And, you know, it's been a really, really good scheme. It's not quite finished yet, but we're nearly there. So thank the officers, and thank you, Shalene, for doing it.
Excellent. Good news. Well done all. Councillor Bird, did you want to comment, or you? No. Councillor Chitton, probably the same? No. Councillor Powell.
Yeah, Mr Chair, this is, I mean, the actual report and the work that Shalene has done, if I can echo Councillor Sam's work, has been absolutely excellent, and she's been involved right from the word go with the Parish Council, and that's very much appreciated. Just one thing totally outside of what we're talking about tonight. When the road surface is actually done, we want quality products, which means that the road doesn't melt. So if that could be fed back to Kent Highways or whoever the contractors are, because they did a brilliant job last time until it became warm, until it came over to 85 degrees, and all of a sudden the road started disappearing. So if we could actually minute that, because I know it's not going to happen over the next few months, well, I sincerely hope not, but it might do next summer. Thank you.
That has been noted. And again, we're all asked to note the report, and I think it's a positive one. Is that noted, members? Thank you. Mr. Borman, let's see if you can keep the good news stuff flowing and give us a Bridges Gyratory post-scheme monitoring report.
Thank you, Chairman. This report is brought to you following a request for further information in relation to the post-scheme monitoring for the Maidstone Bridges Gyratory. Further interrogation has been carried out of the data collected on Wednesday the 13th, 16th of March and 17th of March 2019. Pedestrians were observed crossing the lower High Street to the Broadway Bridge, which identified that 99% of pedestrians use the facility as it is meant. There is unfortunately still 1% of pedestrians who cross in an unsafe manner. However, this unsafe practice has not resulted in any recorded incidents. Similarly, cyclists have been observed in relation to the usage of the existing cycling facility. It was observed that more experienced cyclists utilise the carriageway, whereas non-experienced cyclists utilise the dedicated cycle route, which has more signage incorporated as part of the scheme. With regards to the traffic data, I draw your attention to 4.9 in the report. This shows the results have indicated the scheme is no worse than if the project had not been delivered. It actually details the PRC, which is the practical reserve capacity. Now you might look at that table in 4.9 and think that they're awful results because there's a lot of minus figures in there. If I draw your attention to 4.9.1, the PRC is a measure of how well a junction operates based on the operation of the worst performing lane in one scenario. The higher percentage, the more capacity is available for additional traffic. A negative percentage indicates that junction is operating at or over capacity. Basically what this means is, although we've delivered the scheme and it has been a success and we are reaping the benefits of that particular scheme, it does identify that the additional capacity that we've managed to incorporate with the scheme has backfilled and is saturating already. However, it does mean that the scheme is operating at no worse capacity, or indeed slightly better capacity than it was if we hadn't delivered the scheme. So in conclusion, on the whole, the gyratory has been a success. Since opening, there have been very few negative comments, and the system will continue to be monitored with any minor adjustments to the traffic signal timings where necessary to maximise its performance. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I can try and unravel the double negatives there, I think what you're saying is it would have been a lot worse if we hadn't done it. Yes. Right. Thank you. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. I called for this report some time ago, and I am aware of the fact that the officer inherited this scheme, and obviously it's had. We've got the results. We've got an awful lot of raw data, but I think that the chart in 4.9 does give us a good, clear indication. In particular, that if we compare 2013 observed with 2019 observed with the scheme, you can see that there really isn't much difference at all between the AM numbers and the PM numbers before and after. In fact, we're actually more over capacity in the AM section now than we were before. I brought this request to the committee really because residents in my area were questioning me because the scheme was delivered and early on there was lining to be done and there was other things that needed to be put in place. But they were sort of almost concerned that their regular route was taking longer with the reroute than previously, and feeling that that shouldn't be the case, I was asked to investigate further. Now, I would say that in total, this scheme has cost quite a bit. We got from the local growth fund, we got £4.6 million towards the scheme, and Maidstone Borough Council donated 1.14 million. So we're pretty much knocking on for £6 million to bring about these changes, and we're not seeing an enormous benefit. And I do question whether or not the initial modelling that brought us to the point of giving the green light to this scheme, whether there might have been a flaw in our original modelling, and whether we're not receiving the benefits in terms of long-term capacity or spare capacity that we might have considered early on. So I would like, given we got the local plan review, we've got a lot of problems on our roads. If there was something that failed in the modelling early on, I would like that to be reconsidered, because if we go forward with schemes from developer to contribution and we say this will mitigate for the housing in this area, that area, and we find that we're not getting the benefit that we want, I think we're really going to be in trouble.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Clark. And we've spoken today about the results, and hopefully I've addressed your concerns this morning. Just coming back to obviously the modelling results way back in 2013 for a scheme that was then opened in 2017, I completely understand your comments, and to give you some confidence moving forward, although this was delivered as a joint venture, and it was delivered very successfully between Maidstone and Kent County Council, that was predominantly from design onwards. Having said that, moving forward, there is a lot more collaborative working that's going on between Maidstone Borough Council and Kent County Council in the delivery of mitigation measures for proposals for development, or indeed any major schemes moving forward. So I can absolutely give you more confidence that anything that we're proposing is going to deliver the benefits that they say they're going to deliver at the outset, rather than a situation that, unfortunately, you know, and I'll hold my hand up, that we find ourselves with this particular scheme, that yes, it is better than if we weren't to deliver, but we are still above that reserve capacity where we would like to be.
I think the thing that always sticks in my mind from, you know, wind the clock back probably 5 years, maybe a bit more, when we were at an earlier stage with local plan making, and we had some very early headline figures about the traffic modelling. And the thing that really sticks in my mind, there was that worst case scenario: you build all these houses, it will be 40% worse. The line underneath said, and if you didn't build them, it will be 20% worse anyway, with the amount of background growth that's going on. So when we see things like this, it doesn't outrageously shock me, but it does make me think how much worse it might be if we weren't making the mitigations like this and the other ones that we do have planned. You know, even if there was no growth, there are more cars, there are more users, there are more convenience journeys. That's a harsh reality of it. Councillor Cox, I think you're next.
Thank you very much. I did have 3 points to say, but you've just said it perfectly, so I won't need to say that one. I will say that getting out of St Peter's Street is a lot safer without having any actual traffic lights at that junction. I think that is a very good improvement. I also would like to ask, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place to ask, but it's part of the scheme, where are we with the flood doors on the Medway Street subway? Because it's mentioned, the actual place is mentioned in 3.2. So I wondered whether we had any consensus about where we were going, and if there was any money left, could we make the no entry signs as you carry on, go back round towards the bottom end of the high street on the right-hand side? If they could be made slightly larger, we wouldn't see people when you're sitting there in the traffic coming towards you. It might be a little bit more of a deterrent than a 45 RPM single sitting in front of you, but thank you.
Yeah, if I can take that in 2 stages. In relation to the Medway Street flood defence, I've spoken to colleagues only this morning and yesterday. The scheme itself has been passed over to Gen 2, of KCC, and they are currently progressing it. Unfortunately, I am told that they've hit a slight obstacle in terms of the consultant that they're currently working with. Having said that, what I've engaged to do for them is to actually make contact with that consultant personally, because clearly we had dealings with the contractor that was going to install the barrier and manufacture the barrier in the first instance. And I am going to talk to the consultant and make sure that they are fully aware of the situation with that particular contractor of the barrier itself, because ultimately that design is completed, it's finished, it's ready to go. Ultimately, all they've got to do is manufacture and fit. So I'm not 100% convinced what the delay is, but I absolutely will take that up, and I'm moving forward with that. I've literally had the contact details emailed me today, and I will press that for you. Absolutely, that's no problem. In terms of the no entry signs, this was looked at whilst we were actually on site. Now, those signs are the biggest signs that we can get at that location without the fear of them being impacted by vehicles. However, what we were looking to do at the time, and hasn't been implemented, and I'm very aware of that, is actually, although it's in contravention of the traffic signs manual, is actually putting some direction lines through the yellow boxes, which we've agreed to implement. Obviously, we need to make sure that we can do that safely, so it will need a time where we can get out there and do that. It'll probably be at night, but that is something that we're going to implement. But those no entries are the biggest ones that we can get there for safety reasons.
Councillor Bird is next, but the way Councillor Kimmett sort of leapt on that, it was like you wanted to add something very, very relevant. So I want to let you go first and then...
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
That's not to say that you wouldn't be relevant, Councillor Bird.
Is it, obviously, I drive continuously, sometimes on a Saturday night, 20, 30 times I'll go around that system. And I'm always seeing people, especially late at night, because to see the signs late at night, and like, like my colleague said, they're about that big. Yeah, it's just bigger than a CD. And you can't see them, and the amount of times you'll see traffic going the wrong way, and then they have to do a 15-point turn to come back out. It is very, very dangerous. Is there no way that, not just having the small signs, but could you put some signs at the lower level, i.e. on bollards, maybe?
Yeah, again, we investigated that option as well. Clearly, having a bollard or a keep left or a no entry bollard at that location would require a larger centre island to actually site that. But I can certainly take that back, and we can see what other measures that we can implement. I mean, approaching the junction as you come over the bridge on the directional sign, there was a special sign that was made to actually indicate that that was a no entry as well. But clearly you can't accommodate for all drivers, but I will actually absolutely take that back and see what else we can implement to try and make that a safer junction.
Yeah, just one thing I want to add to that. Personally, as a professional driver, I would say that that is a design flaw, 100% totally a design flaw.
Councillor Bird.
Chairman, I'm not going to get into that argument, but I do share the view that better signage will be very valuable. I don't drive the gyrator as often as some of the members here, but I do use it most days, both ways. And my gut feeling is that it is performing slightly better than it was before, notwithstanding traffic volumes. What we have to remember, though, is that the performance of this junction and any other junction in Maidstone can easily get upset by external events. And the biggest external events that we have in Maidstone are water mains and gas pipes. And we have so many problems, particularly in Broadway recently, in the last few months. I mean, we've had, I don't know how many water problems, and we've had gasworks and other things as well. And we all know what happens. They dig the hole and then, you know, they want to do some gas, but it fills up with water, so they need the other utility. And it does make it very difficult to judge performance, because we always remember when we get held up. We're not being held up because of the fundamental design. We're being held up because somebody else has messed the system. So.
Completely agree. There is no resilience in our network as it stands, and you know, if we were looking for wider benefits when it comes to another matter, that might be one of them. Councillor Daly.
Chairman, I was going to say that as far as I'm concerned, the gyratory now works far, far better, and most times you can, with a bit of luck, swing through it quite simply. But, and there is always a but, isn't it? When we look at these pages on which the diagrams are shown here, we can see how complicated this really is. I mean, the whole thing is massively complicated. But the only problem is northbound, when you come out of the gyratory, and you want to get a nice green flow down to the railway bridge and Stacey Street and one thing or another, you are 9 times out of 10, I would say, held up by the traffic lights, letting traffic out from the side roads, which are on the right-hand side there, particularly Earl Street and St Faith Street, those two particularly. And it just blocks the flow altogether. Now, I'm assured that these things are being watched all the time, and you've got a means of altering the traffic signal timings, and that's fine, and I believe that. So that's that. But the other thing, of course, I was always banging on about was the yellow boxes not being observed, and I was told that we couldn't do much about it because it was outside London, and therefore all the restrictions that you have in London don't apply. But I thought we were actually talking to Traffic for London or somebody up there to see whether or not these yellow box junctions on these particular junction areas were going to be able to be enforced with cameras. Now, I don't know whether that's gone anywhere or not, but my own view is that yellow boxes, generally speaking, are often just ignored, but the words "keep clear" do work. And they work successfully in some other places. So I don't really know, but I'd like to hear from Mr. Bourne on that case, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. In relation to the traffic signals, you're absolutely right. They are linked to our Highway Management Centre, so they can be reviewed on an hourly, minute, second basis. And if there's observed any issues at that gyratory, then they can be adjusted accordingly. With respect to the yellow boxes, you're absolutely right. Our director, Simon Jones, has started conversations with the relevant people to see if we can get the yellow box junction enforcement in the county. Now, I'm not party to those discussions, but I can certainly take that back and ask him, and I can update you accordingly.
That's good news. Councillor Cumming.
Thank you, Chairman. I wonder how much these mathematical prediction models take account of human nature, which makes many people avoid congested areas. New traffic schemes improve it, but then people who have avoided it for years come back to it and wonder why it's still congested, and they don't see the level of claimed improvement.
Yes. So within the modelling that occurs, obviously patterns of travel and trip generation is actually taken into account, and quite rightly, as you say, there's an understanding that if you make a junction better, improve its capacity, make it more usable to the travelling public, then there's more people that want to use that particular junction. So all of those things are actually taken into account when the modelling is run. So in answer to your question, yes, those things are considered and are taken into account when we're actually running those particular models.
I was going to say you have the last word, Councillor Powell, but there is a last minute creep in, but then we'll wrap this item up. So, Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I must travel through kind of Maidstone at the wrong times because I'm still one of those people that seems to be stuck every time I go through the town, and there seems to be enormous traffic levels. But I take on board the little chart there tonight that shows me that it's actually doing quite well. And listening to some of the reports here tonight, I think that other people seem to be experiencing that. But I'm not quite one of the people that was the 40% that said how much worse it was going to get once all the development was completed within Maidstone, if it ever does get completed and it doesn't get pushed on and review after review and whatever else. But I'll be extremely keen to look at another part of this modelling to see what the traffic levels were going to be like in the next 5 or 10 years, especially after we have the review of the local plan and the additional schools and everything, which are going to mean that kids are going to go from one side of Maidstone to the other side, remembering that this is the best that it's ever going to get. It's only ever going to go downhill from here because more people, more cars, more traffic, etc. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you for your question, and it's quite right to raise that. We've done modelling work for this particular area right up to 2031, which obviously takes into account the current local plan growth and background growth, but absolutely, we're now within a local plan review period, and that may have a further impact on this. So we've now got that raw data that allows us to interrogate the potential for the impact of any local plan growth within the surrounding area, and we've got that data that we can provide to people, and then we have an understanding of how those particular developments then impact on that on the gyratory system as well. So it's something that we've got, we can develop, and we can utilise that information moving forward.
Sorry, just one point. The reason why I was saying that, because at some stage this will be at capacity, so I think now is the time to stop talking about it and really explore the alternatives.
It's only at capacity if you don't do anything to improve it. That's not to say it's possible to improve it, but there may be further measures, who knows. Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. Quite recently at strategic planning, we had an item where we discussed air quality along the Bishop's Way Stone Street corridor. And from that, we had a proposal to move forward with a red route along that section. And that's being worked between KCC and NBC. A report's coming back, I believe, in January next year to SPI. But I'm just wondering, given that we're looking at that piece of work that goes right up to the gyratory, if we were to consider maybe red box junctions on the gyratory, that might be a way of getting what we need now, rather than waiting for the change in emphasis on the yellow box junctions, given it goes right the way up to that point. Just a thought.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Clark. I'm not aware of that piece of work, but if we can have a discussion outside of this meeting, I'm happy to talk to the KCC representative and see what we can do to achieve that.
Right, members, we're asked to note. Is the report noted? You're not off the hook yet, Mr. Borman. Item 18, verbal update. Leeds Langley.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This verbal update has been prepared for me, so I will try and answer any questions thereafter. As members will be aware, KCC commissioned WSP to undertake traffic surveys and modelling to assess the traffic and economic benefits of a relief road. The previous modelling to support the local plan was dated and area-wide and would not have been suitable to carry out the required level of assessment for a relief road or to a standard required to support any future funding bid opportunities. The initial modelling has been completed looking at the situation in 2031, the end of the local plan period, and the indications are that While, as might be expected, a relief road would provide significant benefits to Leeds and Langley, its wider benefits to the existing network in the southeast Maidstone may be limited. Officers continue to work with WSP to interrogate and fully understand the modelling work and the assumptions made before the work is completed and in a position to formally report to the new strategic board. The new traffic model will also be available to support the review of the local plan that the Borough has recently commenced. Thank you.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I knew what Russell was going to say this evening, and I think where we are on this at the moment comes as a little bit of a disappointment in terms of I think there was an expectation that a Leeds Langley relief road could and would deliver more relief to the surrounding area than this report would seem to indicate. One of the things that I think that we really need to interrogate very closely and work with the companies that and officers that are looking at this is the level of rat running that has increased throughout the whole of the southeast area of Maidstone. The other thing is that we were talking about the gyratory and capacity on other junctions, noting that the original provision for housing has yet to be fully built out. So the implications of that are not yet fully known either. I think one of the areas that I'm particularly keen to see improved, because I think, and it's not a matter, and I'm going to emphasise it, it's not a matter of the junction between the A274 and Willington Street. It's not a question of the A274. It is from the 274 all the way down to the A20. Willington Street is chock-a-block. And what we need to do is have some relief for Willington Street in some way. Now, it is clearly part of the HGV route, and if there was an alternative route, and by that I mean a potential for a Leeds Langley relief road, there is the opportunity then for us to have a discussion and look at putting weight restrictions on roads like Willington Street to give some relief, and that in itself, I believe, would help with some of the air quality issues that particular part of Maidstone suffers from greatly. So I think we have to note the report as it is. We can't, but I do think there's more work to be done, and I understand that if, depending on some of that work that's done, there's still opportunities. And personally, by working together closely with the colleagues at the Borough Council, I would hope to see a Leeds Langley relief road included within the local plan review, especially as you start to look at the sites and potential more housing. So I'm not giving up yet. I'm hoping that we can demonstrate that there will be, as I expect, more broadly benefit from a Leeds Langley relief road for the surrounding area than this report initially would seem to indicate. Although I recognise that clearly, and we've always known, residents along the 2163 would be the principal beneficiaries of any Leeds Langley relief road. That was always going to be the case. The question is how other people benefit from it as well.
Well, I think this is an interesting twist because, I think there's smoke and mirrors still. I think the mirrors are being moved and the smoke is clearing. But I remember very distinctly a few meetings back, this feasibility work was discussed and it was quite a hard-nosed answer. It will come down to the cost-benefit ratio. And I said, but what about the wider benefits relieving Willington Street? Relieving places like Yalding, because that's where the rat running actually goes, it's massively wide. And I was actually told, well, no, that doesn't come into it. It's a hard-nosed cost-benefit ratio. And I am given to understand that the cost-benefit ratio is coming out okay. So you know, I don't think any of us has given up on this, and there's lots of constructive council dialogue to be had. It's only just beginning, it's not the end.
Chairman, can I come back just briefly then? Because I'd like to support you. If in terms of attracting funding for a new road, the cost-benefit ratio is a very key and important factor. And my understanding is that the work currently done would indicate that a Leeds Langley relief road would meet that criteria, but clearly to get that to where it needs to be, more work needs to be done. So what I'm hoping that the JTB will do this evening is note the report, and we continue to work on this, and hopefully we can work with Maidstone Borough Council in a spirit of cooperation on the potential for a relief road, and the opportunity to put a relief road into the local plan review. Thank you, Chair.
I don't really think much more needs to be said unless anybody's got a burning desire to add to that. Councillor Cox.
Will we actually see the full report? So that we can, rather than just a paragraph that you've got on a piece of paper, if the cost-benefit ratio is there and the amount of housing that will have to be there to deliver it, I'd like to see all the details before obviously we're making any nods, agreeing, whatever. We need to have all the facts. We can't just go on a piece of paper that's been a verbal report that none of us could actually look into the details. We've got so much information here about a road that's actually in place and what it's doing. I'm sure we'd be very interested to see the modelling. Hopefully we can share that. But encouraging.
Can I just say that I think in the spirit of good collaboration, of course it'll be shared, won't it? Of course. Councillor Chitton, if we can keep it brief.
I will indeed, Chairman. I think from what our understanding of it is that the full amount of work that needs to be done is not yet complete. It's not far away. I think they're talking about a month or two, and at which time I'm assuming that we will get a full report which will include cost benefit. It will include the benefit to other areas, and it will include comments about how it needs to be balanced across with the work that we're already doing in other parts of Maidstone and in the other roads that are adjacent. But my understanding is that we're a month or two away from actually getting that report, and this was effectively a holding report.
Members, we are asked to note. Can we note? Is it noted? One more, Mr. Borman. MITP update.
Again, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report submitted to the board provides an update on the progress in relation to the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package. I see this as an extremely positive report, given that we find ourselves at a stage this package of measures has not been in previously. There is a new level of confidence regarding the delivery of this package that must be recognised and supported to continue the current momentum. We find ourselves at the point where real improvements can be made to address the existing congestion in and around the town. Physical construction work will commence in 2020, and the CELEP delivery timeframe of 2021 can be achieved. There are still challenges to overcome, but I believe that this is the turning point for the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package, which started in 2015 and demonstrates the continued collaborative working between authorities to deliver a common goal. Whilst concern was raised at the last board meeting in relation to the division of the Local Growth Fund, Kent County Council remains committed to delivering the full package of schemes identified in 2015 and have over-programmed accordingly to maximise the overall advantages for the travelling public. This will be achieved by using either Local Growth Fund, Section 106 funding, or a combination of the two, and will give additional capacity benefits over and above what was originally anticipated. The public consultation, which will be known as Keep Maidstone Moving, will go live in November 2019, And although this consultation has been delayed, this was the right decision to make and will ensure the information received is both meaningful and robust and provide all consultees the best information available, enabling a more informed decision to be made. Members are encouraged to respond to the consultation for any or all of the schemes contained within the document. There will be 3 engagement sessions held during the consultation period, 2 of which will be on separate weekends and 1 in the evening, giving residents the opportunity to talk to the project teams. With this in mind, I would urge members to note this report and accept the designs that have been developed. Officers will present the results of the public consultation at the next available Joint Transportation Board following their collation. This will include all responses received with a recommendation for each scheme and can then be debated accordingly. In conclusion, it is my opinion that the Maidstone Integrated Transport Package demonstrates a significant investment of deliverable schemes that will provide improvements at key locations for all the travelling public. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wellman. I think that is very positive. I'm just wondering how many days we need to book for that meeting when we review all the schemes and the responses in detail, but it's good traction. I am going to start with Councillor Daly.
Thank you, Chairman. I agree. It's a positive report and it's upbeat. There are 1 or 2 things Mr. Borman has helped us recently as local members discussing the Tunbridge Road junction with Fountain Lane. And we know that there are preliminary draft proposals coming forward. We've shown our upset a little bit in the fact that it was a disappointment that the fact that you had to have more money spent getting wider roads there to get some land off somebody else who I think is trying to make a packet at the same time. But anyway, that apart. We do have some reservations, as you know, Mr. Borman, on the question of roundabouts. And relative in this particular place because the sensitivity of the A26 it's very narrow and extremely difficult to negotiate if it becomes blocked. So there's a major road into Maidstone, one of the 2 into Maidstone from the west. So that's that, and I look forward to more conversations with you, and I hope that you'll nod in our direction. Yes, thank you. Because I'm sure that we will come to an agreement, perhaps an arrangement on this performance. But at the moment, we're slightly disappointed in the way in which it's gone forward with regard to yet another roundabout. But thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Chitton.
Thank you, Chairman. Since we first agreed all these in 2015, with the exception of the gyratory system, I've always felt we've been on a go slow, but for the last 6 to 9 months, I think it's like we've been given a boost of Formula One fuel. So I'm really pleased for the last 6 months how it's gone. Thank you, Russell, and your team. I know it's been tough, and I know we've given you a lot of stick on the way. 1 or 2 comments I've got. Cold Harbour roundabout, obviously excellent the way it's going. Loose road corridor, fine. Bearsted Road, slightly disappointing it's 3 months late, but it's certainly going in the right direction. I think it'll be a good scheme when it comes off. Thank you. My 1 concern is still the junction of Willington Street and Sutton Road. I can't really believe that putting a scheme in that's going to be basically no progress and finishing and any progress we get will be finished in 2021, which is about the time we'll finish the work, is good value for money, and we don't even know we can buy the land. So I've got no idea. I know we agreed it here, unfortunately, but I have no idea how we're going to pursue that or how we can prove it's good value for money. I'm hoping that, especially as we had another scheme that was going to take it to 2031 and not 2021. So other than that one, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I think we're making some good progress here, and it's nice to see, and I look forward to it all coming forward. Thank you very much.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. The previous speakers have actually mentioned a couple of things that I was going to mention also. I do think the officer the officer and his team have had a real challenge with this, and I do welcome the fact that they're quite amenable to discussion on all the complexities of the various junctions. My most recent discussion with Russell was with regard to the Cripple Street site. We are struggling to get the necessary benefit at that junction, really because of the topology. Our real concern is, or the real problem that we have with that junction is not the A229 corridor itself, it's the ingress and egress from Cripple Street and Borton Lane. And we had a discussion this morning, and there's a couple of points there that the officer can take back. But I think we really have to get it to consultation. The time's very short, and we haven't really got this out to the public beyond sort of the politicians and what they've come back to us with their feedback. I just think we should get it out and carry on with the good discussions that we're having so far.
Keep the momentum going. Councillor Cumming, I will give you the last word on this and then we'll close the item.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. The A274 Willington Street Junction project has raised concerns over the short-term capacity benefit, but these should be addressed by a Leeds-Langley relief road. And in that respect, I support Councillor Cook's comments on the previous item, which I wanted to comment on at that time.
There's a very interesting interplay between the modelling for Leeds-Langley and that as to which junction was in the model for the Leeds-Langley, and actually the benefit of the Leeds-Langley might be higher if they hadn't. Anyway, there's lots of detail to go through and I think it will work very well. Members, is the report noted?
Chairman, can I just say one more thing?
The report's noted and Mr Borman wants to say one last thing.
Thank you, Mr Chairman. I've got some handouts here for members to take away. It's in relation to the forthcoming consultation, and I urge people to put this where they will for people to see, and then be able to try and get as many responses as we can for the consultation coming forward. So I will hand these round for people to take away today.
Right, that's excellent. That item's concluded. Agenda item 20 is your back pages of the agenda. That's just a written report for noting. If that's noted, then I'm happy to declare the meeting closed. Thank you everyone for your contribution and participation. Thank you.